Welcome everyone to Chasing Tents. My name is Abby. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm back, guys, after a bit of a break, and I'm back on the brink of a second UK lockdown. Guys, keep your spirits high. I know things are a bit down and low. A lot of Euro track days, track events have been cancelled, so keep your spirits high. Anyways, I'm back with this new series of episodes. Number one episode today. This series is going to be called Know Your Stuff. So number one episode today is all going to be about motorbike tuning. ECU tuning, remaps, fueling modules, full exhaust slip-ons, and all sorts of things. I'm going to make this very punchy by having question and answers all throughout this episode. So you guys are not going to get bored. It's not going to be a science lesson. It's not going to be very long and very boring. It's going to be divided into a number of sections. And all the questions are mentioned in the description. Most important thing I want to tell you, you guys must be thinking what a small vlogger like me has got for you in terms of information. Where do I get my information and why you should listen to me? I got my information through bennetts.co.uk, very reputable, very kind of well-known website in the UK. They went to BSD Performance, a very well-known tuning company in Peterborough, and my own personal experience from having an Aprilia RSV4 RF, and my bike has been tuned by none other than PCR Performance in Cannock, who run the OMG British Superbike race team. I've also dealt with Race HQ in Leeds, who are fantastic, and P3 Tuning in Liverpool, who are amazing. And my first tuning was done by Road Race Performance Meriden, just outside Coventry in UK. I've also sent my ECU to Italy to get it tuned through Gabbro, another Aprilia guru who knows a lot about tuning. And I've gone through some self-learning maps as well. So I've made some mistakes and I've learned some lessons. Also, I've learned a lot in my journey. So please, guys, do stick with me. You can pause this video right now, get a cup of tea, because this is going to be really interesting for anyone who's got a bike, big or small, road or track. So let's start this video. So let's start with the first question. How does motorbike tuning actually work? The ECU, which is the electronic controlled unit of the bike, is just like our brain. It's got a number of sensors, it's measuring a lot of things, it monitors a lot of things, but three major things it monitors. Number one, the engine. So things like crank speed, kind of water temperature, cam speed, manifold pressures. Then you've got the outside world, things like the ambient temperature, the air density, and all sorts of things. Number three is the rider's input, things like throttle, brake, and kind of gear changes. Now let's quickly look at a scientific definition of what the ECU is doing. The ECU decides what instructions to give the engine by comparing the various input data against a pre-programmed set of tables or maps, like you and me know, crammed with numbers like a spreadsheet, and then choosing the values from all those maps to give the desired result. Now, I know it all sounds kind of straightforward, but very scientific. However, what you got to realize is what the ECU is doing is taking measurements on what's going on and what the rider wants, looks it up, then fires out the commands to make it happen. Clearly, this happens kind of a million times every second. Now, the problem we've got is the data in the ECU is very generic. What I mean by that is the ECU instructions are only as good as the information it gets from its sensors, and also having the right numbers in the tables. And this is where the problem with standard maps sensors begin, because what we want as riders isn't always the manufacturers giving us. Okay, now we got the boring stuff out of the way. Let's move on to something very interesting. What's wrong with your standard ECU? Now, an ECU serves three masters. Before I told you what ECU measures, three things. Now, who it serves, three masters. Number one, the customer, you. Number two, the accountant of the company. Number three, the environmentalist. So number one, the customer, so it wants to give you the right kind of throttle response and everything like that, so you are happy. Number two is trying to keep the environmentalists happy by having good emissions, so Euro 4, Euro 5, things like that. And also number three is trying to do all of that by keeping the bosses, the accountants happy, by keeping the costs as low as possible. Now this is where the problem is. These demands are often contrary and mean ECU maps are always a compromise. Now for you and me as riders, once we bought a bike, we don't necessarily care how much the ECU mapping cost the manufacturer, how little time they had to get the programming right, and how many emissions tests the engine can pass. All we want as riders is for our bike to feel nice and make as much as performance as it can. This is where remapping or reflashing or bolt-on modules like power commanders and rapid bike or Bajaj units come in. Okay, let's move on to the next question. What's a remap and what's a module, like a fueling module? Now, both are trying to achieve the same thing, which is trying to change the ECU's behavior slightly. So basically, what I mean is remapping is unlocking the pre-programmed software inside the ECU, accessing the various maps and altering the numerical values to change the instruction the ECU sends out. It can also switch off various limiters and alter other parameters and tell the ECU not to panic and show a fault code if it spots something out of spec. I hope that kind of made sense. Let's move on to the fueling module side. So basically, a fueling module takes a very different approach. It sits alongside the ECU and it hijacks either the signals from the sensor inputs to the ECU, the output signals from the ECU to the engine, or both of them, and modifies them to give the instructions we want to give. It also tells the ECU that nothing's wrong to stop it showing any fault codes. Okay, time for a layman definition. So what I was trying to explain to you here is ECU remapping is just like if you go to a foreign country, you want to learn a foreign language, imagine someone's downloaded that language straight into your brain, okay? And then you can speak it, fine. And on the other side, the modules is like you are in the foreign country and there is a translator all the time with you trying to translate what you want to say. So both kind of do the same thing, but in a very different ways. Now let's move on to the next question. How do you know that you need a remap or a fueling module? Now, the answer is depending on the feel and also the new bikes which are coming from the manufacturers. So what you got to realize is when you're riding your bike, you bought a new bike. Number one, it comes with 4 or 5 catalytic converters these days, and you've got snatchy throttle. You've got no throttle for no power for the first second or two, and then suddenly power comes. So snatchy power, lumpy power. You've got acceleration on a track and suddenly you get a surge of power, or you've got like flat spots in the power, or also kind of lumpy curve in your power. All these things are all about feel. And what you got to realize is a lot of these manufacturers are doing these emission tests at lower revs. That's why you get a lot of lumpy power with these new bikes, because it's all about cities and towns, and this is what they are clamping down on. So people riding in the cities and towns are going to be riding under low revs, and that's what they test. And hence, they want to make sure when the bikes are going for testing, these lower revs kind of emissions are passed, and at least the bike is just passed. That's all they're worried about. The bike just want to pass, and then later on, they know everyone's going to do a remap at some point. Secondly, why would you want to do a remap or a fueling module is when you've changed your exhaust. Now, changing just the slip-on and keeping the catalytic converters isn't that much of a big deal, but if you are changing the air filter and you're changing like the kind of mid-pipe section and maybe a full system, then definitely you must think of a remap or a fueling module. Because what you got to think of, the bike's been programmed to send the amount of fuel, or it knows the amount of air coming through that stock paper filter, and if you put a kind of very perforated translucenty race filter and you do a full exhaust or the mid-pipe chain, the bike doesn't know about it. The bike is programmed to do something else and you want it to do something else. So that's why a remap is essential, to get that smooth power curve, to get that beautiful kind of fuel and air mixture. So, and remember guys, remaps are not all about horsepower and torques. They're all about getting the fuel and air mixture right. So you've got a lovely fuel, kind of lovely nice curve in the power range, and also better rideability. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Which is better, a remap or a module? Now it depends on who you ask. A remapper who's really done his homework, and the kind of engine tuners with their own dyno and who've really educated themselves in the intricacies of modern ECU programming, will always say remapping is the only way to gain full control of an ECU and bend it to your will. And they also say that they can alter kind of parts of the ECU that modules cannot. For example, no fueling module or a module can currently access the ECU's throttle map, which remappers say is vital for smooth throttle. And on some bikes, for example like KTM's or Yamaha MT-10s, it's very, very important to get the throttle mapping correct. And on the other side of the spectrum, fueling module retailers will say visiting a tuning shop hundreds of miles away from your home and having someone to do brain surgery on your bike is completely not needed, and is also becoming increasingly difficult as manufacturers are tightening up security of standard ECUs instead. Now, I am a big example of that because I own an Aprilia RSV4 RF. ECUs of Aprilias, and I think BMWs as well, are notoriously difficult to get into. So that's why I tried not only some self-learning maps to start with, then got them deleted, then got a power commander with a secondary fueling module because I couldn't really modify anything inside the ECU because there was no one around at that time. It was 2016, I think, to do it. Then sent my ECU to a chap in Italy called Gabbro, who has got Aprilia maps, proper maps. I know you can get maps from dealerships with an exhaust, but kind of fine-tuned real track-based throttle maps are only done by proper people with dynos. So yeah, I've been kind of everywhere and anywhere searching for answers, and that's why I'm kind of making these videos, because because I've been through anywhere and everywhere to get my bike sorted out, and I've learned a lot of things, you know, by doing so. Now, both these approaches, a remap or a fueling module, can lead to happy customers, but if you speak to any honest fuel module retailer, he will always say to you, if your ECU can be deciphered and get into, so people can change everything inside the ECU to suit your riding style or track riding style or road riding style, then please take it to the proper dyno place so you can properly get it sorted. And if you want a fueling module on top, more than welcome to. Okay, let's move on to the next question. What are the pros and cons of a remap? Now, the pros and cons of each approach are straightforward. What matters to you and me is, what's the cost? How convenient is it? How reversible is it? How effective is it? The cost of a remap varies with the complexity of a bike. Now, European bikes have a diagnostics port that can be accessed and ECU maps extracted and uploaded. It's like a front door. Japanese ECUs are sealed off. There is a diagnostic port, but you can't use it to get maps in or out of the ECU. Instead, the ECU has to be physically removed, which isn't that hard. I mean, it's usually accessible, and spare pins on the ECU access in order to get in. But overall, remapping access is getting harder and harder. 10 years ago, ECUs were much more basic. The code was simpler, the remapping was straightforward. Many tuners and remappers could go in, change it themselves, a bit of experience without needing too many codes cracking. Now, today, ECUs are so complex, remappers have to use third-party software to gain access, and even then, that's not enough. Now, look at the new Ducati Panigale V4. I mean, it takes so long because it's got encrypted ECU. You need to crack that. It won't open without a key code. A software developer got around it and was about to release the software when Ducati found out and changed the key code straight away. Now, so anyone who takes their remap Panigale in for a service will find when it comes out, the ECU has been updated, wiped, reset to factory settings, and a new key code has been installed. At the moment, no other manufacturer does it, but they certainly could if they wanted. Now, common sense would say if your bike is on the list of popular machines with obvious throttle and control issues, then Remap offers a more comprehensive and fundamental solution than a module would, but maybe it's just less convenient. Okay, now let's look at the pros and cons of a fueling module. A module, like a rapid bike or a power commander or Bazaars unit, can be ordered on the internet and delivered pre-programmed to your door. Most modules are plug and play. They clip into the bike's existing wiring harness and no wire cutting or slicing is required. But installation simplicity varies depending on the complexity of the module. Now, basic entry-level modules are simple to wire into the bike and only connect to a few sensors, but more powerful race style or track orientated modules require attaching to more sensors and connections and could take a fair bit of bodywork dismantling to get in. So not for an average Joe like myself really, but in theory you can do it at home with limited tools and technical knowledge. But be warned, you will have to read a lot of instructions in a manual, and I'm not being sexist, but us men are not very good with manuals. But the main thing is all modules are completely reversible and come pre-programmed with recommended maps. However, software can be downloaded that allows programming of the module at home. This is not always recommended because it opens up the potential for not only making the bike unpleasant to ride but also damaging it. Now, these plug-in modules can be as little as 150 all the way up to 700 pounds depending on what you're buying. I mean, I've seen how a rapid bike unit works. I personally have a power commander with a secondary fueling module. It's just the way the Aprilia V4 works. But I've also ridden a bike with a Bajaj unit which had a plus and minus traction control unit, rain modes and all sorts of goodies with it. So kind of these days the fueling modules have moved up a notch, so they are not too bad. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Does a remap or module make more power and torque? Now, most remappers, especially the honest ones, will admit a remap on its own won't produce significant power or torque gains because that's not the point. The point is to optimize fueling to match a change in exhaust and intake or making the throttle feel nice to use. So, rideability of the bike is improved more than its outright power or torque. However, most bikes will show a slight improvement, some more than others, but not always. Now, fueling module retailers on the other side are sometimes keen to suggest their solution do make significant power and torque gains. Now, each bike is different, that's what you got to remember, and some say that some respond better to a remap, the other ones respond better to a fueling module. I mean, that's a notion as well. But kind of with modern bikes, only proper mechanical tuning can lead to significant power and torque improvements. Fueling and exhaust tuning tend to be a bit more subtle. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Does having a fueling module or remapping your bike give you better or worse fuel economy? Now, it all depends on rider to rider, bike to bike, and I mean, a lot of people aren't really bothered about fuel economy, but if you are a touring guy and you're bothered about fuel economy, they say a smoother power curve will give you a better fuel economy rather than a snatchy power curve. That's all I can say. But at the end of the day, it all depends on how you ride your bike, the terrain, tires, pressures. There's so many different parameters when it comes to fuel economy. So it's a very subjective thing. But yeah, it's all bike to bike, rider to rider. All right, let's move to the next question. What will the bike feel like after you've had a remap or a fueling module? Now, that also varies. Some bikes are so snatchy or crude to ride, the difference will be immediate, and within a few seconds, you'll feel it better, smoother, and more alive. On some bikes, the improvements are more subtle, and it might make a mini roundabout or wet weather to appreciate the improvements in the actual throttle response. Okay, next question is very common. I fitted a aftermarket end can. Do I need a remap or a module? It depends. I mean, nowadays on most bikes, if you just change the end can and leave the cat or cats, these days we got a number of cats. Everything else is in place. It doesn't really take much difference because there's so much emissions gubbins in the front of the exhaust that swapping the end can really doesn't change much. It might not even make it even louder, let alone after fueling. As unlike older bikes, some modern end cans are simply straight through and just use wave deflection into internal padding to add a final element of noise deadening. Older bikes, however, had more pipe work in the end can to help manage back pressure tuning as well as silence the engine. Okay, next question is, I've swapped my end can and fitted a decat link pipe to the standard downpipe. Do I need a remap or a module? Yes, this is a common thing these days. I mean, I've done it to spare the cost of a full system, but to get similar benefits. A lot of decats require cutting the cat off at the headers, then sliding on a link pipe. Although on a few bikes the cat simply slides off. This means it'll benefit from a remap or a module to get rid of that flat spots and optimize fueling. Next question is, if you fitted a full system and change your air filter, would you need a remap or a fueling module? Yes. 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 There is no ifs or buts. That a definitive yes. Okay, next question is quite interesting and quite important. Can adding a fueling module or remapping your bike get you in a bit of a trouble with your local dealership or void the warranty completely? Now, remaps, if done properly by a professional, are no problem at all. However, if the wrong maps are loaded into the ECU, you could completely brick it permanently. Now, in terms of the engine, again, a professional install should be safe, but electronics are so powerful these days that it probably is a kind of technically feasible to set up a ECU so badly that it actually can damage the engine. Now, it's also possible to set up a module so badly that it can damage the engine as well. But it's worth noting, a properly remapped engine ought to be theoretically more reliable because it's running safer and air-fuel ratio is proper. So it'll run properly. So it'll be more reliable, maybe longer life as well. Going back to the warranty side of the question, it's a bit of a gray area and largely down to the discretion of your local dealer. I mean, however, it's worth noting that some remappers actually get business from dealers who are tired of customers complaining about snatchy throttles and send them for a remap to just shut the customers up. And that's true. Okay, next question is also very interesting. Do you need to tell your insurance company you've done a remap or added a fueling module? This has no gray area, I reckon. I reckon don't hide anything from your insurance company. Now, I am not kind of tied with B-Moto. I mean, I use B-Moto in the UK. I have declared every single kind of upgrade, and you know, remapping, changing the exhaust is one of the most common things. So most insurance companies haven't got a problem with it. So don't hide this from the insurance company. If the big gray area is ABS delete. So a lot of people kind of do the ABS delete, take the bike on the track and then keep it for the road. Now, if you are in an accident, they find out you've deleted the ABS, which is a compulsory item now with the EU, then obviously they will void your insurance and you will not get paid out. So yeah, better declare it. Now, another really interesting question is, how can you tell that your bike has actually been remapped? There are fake remaps out there, so how can you actually tell the bike has been remapped? Now, this is slightly tricky because most of us have a tendency to want to believe something is authentic, especially if someone in a tuning shop with a bunch of wires and a screen says so. And even more, if we just spend a few £100, then we definitely think it's happened. But the fact is, effects of the changing a throttle map or ignition map are hard to really measure. But for evidence of actually having done something, a tuner should be able to show you the number changes on a map. So before and after results. A good remap should be a fairly complex job, and a good remapper should have plenty to explain to you. If you don't understand it, please keep asking the questions until you do understand. Now, something worth remembering is to be suspicious of big power gain claims for modules or remaps without further engine work. So anyone claiming to give you massive power gains, you should be cautious of. Now, it's also worth noting that anyone claiming to be secretive or not wanting to give away their unique remap secret could be hiding a bad job or not a job at all. Now, remapping isn't magic, guys, and the chances of you deciphering a secret are remote anyway. So someone trying to hide something usually has something to hide, so be super suspicious. Modesty and humility go a long way in this remapping game. So guys, I hope you found this video helpful, but what you got to really remember is on the particular day, there's a lot of things which can matter. You know, some remappers have a very lenient dyno. You know, some have a very strict dyno. Some have a medium dyno. You go there with a super soft tire, you will get less horsepower, you know, because the power gets absorbed. You go there on a dense air day, it'll be different to a super hot day. You know, you could get 2-3 horsepower different on different day with the same bike and the same conditions. So guys, I've had my fair share of experiences with remappers and people who fix fueling modules. I mean, I've been to 6 places and 5 of them have been excellent. And you know, people like PCR Performance in Cannock, Race HQ in Leeds, P3 Tuning in Liverpool, you know, Road Race Performance, Meriden, Coventry. These guys are absolutely brilliant. I've dealt with them, you know. So anyone you find who is trustworthy and you go to them regularly, just ask them more questions, just probe them, and you will really get in-depth information from someone who's honest. Anyways guys, I don't want to keep mumbling on. Hope you found this video interesting. If you like my work, please like this video. If you like what I do and you want to see more of this, please do subscribe and share my video with other people. Look after yourself, take care, don't worry about the lockdown if you're in the UK. It is what it is. We just got to wait for a Euro track day next year.